Many political experts agree that if the Biden administration in the United States continues on to rejoin the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, it'll throw away any leverage the United States earned during the Trump administration. Now, to discuss this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert and U.S. political reporter Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, the deal would essentially ignore key U.S. interests?
Absolutely. It's not looking at any of the evidence on the ground. The fact that the Iranian regime is going forward with its nuclear plan, that a German report actually came out today that said as late as 2020, the Iranian regime was after weapons of mass destruction, and they are continuing in that pursuit. What are U.S. interests when they're sitting at the negotiating table to make a deal with the Iranian regime? Well, we're looking obviously for security. We're looking for hopefully human rights violations to stop back in Iran. That wasn't part of the 2015 deal. We're looking for Iran to stop its terror spending in the region, putting money into Yemen and Iraq and Hezbollah's pockets. You know, these are the easy asks, right? When you want to release all of this money and to normalize relations with a terrorist regime that has such a bloody past. But at the very best, I should say, we're not even going to get back into the 2015 deal, let alone add on these new items or get more concessions out of the Iranian regime. And to add to that, news broke that allegedly John Kerry was telling the foreign minister of Iran all of our secrets with Israel, our main ally in the Middle East, telling them their covert operations in Syria against Iran's assets there. So basically, this is a leaked tape that allegedly says he's part of the National Security Council and the Department of Clean Air and the Environment, but nonetheless, he is an agent of the United States and he is selling out the United States for the Iranian regime. That's one case, one scenario. And the other scenario could be that the Iranian regime is making this up, that there is no leaked tape. Well, then it would be a provocation. It would be another signal and another sign that we shouldn't be at the negotiating table with such an untrustworthy and duplicitous partner such as the Iranian regime.
Lisa, the United States has begun winding down the Afghan military mission. U.S. President Joe Biden says the military drawdown will begin May 1st to close a nearly 20-year war, America's longest. Incredible.
Yes, it's not an easy task, and many are warning against it, saying that the Taliban will, in fact, grow in this vacuum that we've created. But on the other hand, the argument is that we've been there for 20 years and we've lost precious life and we haven't gotten anything in return. There is no stability there. And as we are winding down, the Taliban are ramping up. There have been 62 attacks, 6 suicide bombings in just 11 days since the news about the pullout has been announced and confirmed. And as you said, we are starting this wind down on May 1st, a symbolic date. That was the date that President Trump had set many months ago. That would be our initial pullout date, or our final, I should say, pullout date under the Trump administration. But the Biden administration has decided that that is premature and they will push back to September 11th. And there are 2,500 approximate troops there. They will be pulling out, but already we are seeing the signs of a Taliban ramp up. We're seeing more terrorism than ever before. But what's the end game in all of this?
Will the Afghan government and military be able to contain a lot of these terrorist cells, which will be popping up throughout the country once the United States pulls out?
You know, that has been the dream, the hope that all along that there could have been some sort of nation building. There could have been some coalition on the ground to stop the bad guys from marching forward. But that was never an option, and it never really fortified on the ground. But what we did try to do is the United States tried to bring in the Taliban and said, look, if we can't get rid of you, we have to work with you, and we want you to take the responsibility. We want you to hold civilian life precious. We want you to, continue. And if you're going to be here, you should, answer to us. As long as you don't, build a terror cell here, if you don't launch attacks towards the West here, then we're okay with entrusting you. And already they have broken their ceasefire, they have broken the deal, and they're not to be trusted, of course.
Now, Lisa, speaking of terrorism, 5 people have been detained in France in an anti-terrorism investigation after a police official was stabbed and killed at the station just outside of Paris. Now, one of the assailants, a Tunisian national, apparently visited a Muslim prayer hall prior to the attack and viewed videos glorifying jihad.
Yeah, no surprise there. How it's almost like we've become, immune, or I should say, we're just desensitized to these types of stories. Before, in 2014, when these kind of do-it-yourself type jihadists became radicalized, and we'd hear about stories, whether it be in Europe or the United States or anywhere else. I know Canada had a few. We would stop and we would just worry that it would happen in our neighborhoods. But now it's just, another incident. This was a young woman who was unarmed. She worked at the police station. She was going to work and she was stabbed to death by this Tunisian who was shot to death at the site. But now they are arresting those around him. Those 5 that you mentioned are his father and brother and others that either live with him or knew about this incident. And yes, he had been watching radicalization videos. No shocker there. There are a number of ways in which these individuals become radicalized. And one very easy way is they can just sit in their basements or their parents' home or wherever they sit, and they can watch videos on YouTube, on Twitter, on TikTok, wherever they may be. They're shutting down civilian accounts on these platforms and censoring information on these platforms, but yet these terrorist videos and radicalization material still has a presence there. And that's one way in which these individuals are becoming radicalized. They tell them that you can do it yourself with your car, with a kitchen knife, items that are in plain sight. You can take that and cause one of these attacks. So it's unfortunate, and we should bring our attention back to it before we see more of these attacks.
At least 40 rockets were fired from the Gaza Strip into Israel over the weekend. Lisa, this marks the most dramatic escalation in tensions between the two sides in many months.
Yeah, well, where are they getting the funding from? It's either the United States that doubled down on their funding back to the Palestinians, or they're getting it from the Iranian regime, where we're about to release more money into a nuclear deal. So either way, this should be a wake-up call. I looked at a lot of the headlines over the weekend because I knew from the ground I was getting a lot of the firsthand sources from the IDF, the Israeli military, as to what was happening. But then I looked at a lot of the mainstream media sources and the headlines and how they are so misleading. The headline would say something like Israel hits Gaza, sites after rockets launched. I mean, rockets launched being in the passive, not even saying that there have been up to 40 rockets launched into Israel, into civilian areas where thousands of people spent the weekend in bomb shelters. That's the reality. And the White House should really be listening. They should be watching. This is our ally, and this is where we're about to unleash a lot of money, a lot of terrorism into the region by getting back into an Iran nuclear deal.
Now, anti-Semitism appears to be on the rise here in North America. 4 Jewish centers in New York City were recently pelted with rocks, prompting an investigation by NYPD's Hate Crime Task Force, Lisa.
Yes, a lot of hate crimes, particularly over 50% of them are against Jews in New York. I know that statistic is astounding because New York is the biggest population of Jews in America, I should say anywhere in the world outside of Israel. So to see this anti-Semitism rise in a place where Jews are prevalent and are part of this society is astounding. This is not middle America. This is not a place where no one's met a Jew before. It's astounding. In a place where synagogues are so prevalent that there are 4 in one small area. And there was one assailant, and they showed his picture. And I hope that this proves to be a lesson, and people stand up for Jews, just like the way that they're standing up for African Americans and Asians and others in this country. It's the forgotten minority many times, and anti-Semitism for some reason has been on the rise, and people find a way to justify it, and it's really horrific. These are places of worship. These are places where families and young children hang out, and we hope to see an end to it very soon.
The BBC is reporting that 53 crew are confirmed dead as an Indonesian Navy submarine it actually sank off the coast of Bali last week, and it was found split into 3 different pieces.
Yeah, this was an awful story. I know a lot of people were watching this very closely as we count down the hours of oxygen that they had left. I know we started at 72 and we're watching the clock go down and really praying that they're able to find these individuals. They know that they had a lot of local help over there. A lot of surrounding countries pitched in to help send volunteers, to send crews, but they were unfortunately too deep into the sea for them to be found, and all of them have been pronounced dead, and the cause is still unknown. I know submarine stories are always interesting for everyone because it's still crazy to think that people could be underwater for so many hours in something of a transportation machine that can take them for so many hours. And stories like this, we hope we don't hear them again. And our thoughts and prayers to their families.
Now, here's another sad story, Lisa. At least 82 people were killed in a fire at a hospital treating coronavirus patients in Iraq's capital city of Baghdad. More than 100 others were also injured in the blaze.
Yes, this is because of an oxygen tank explosion. I mean, how horrific to have a loved one in the hospital with COVID, trying to get oxygen, and then to die in the same way by the oxygen tank. It's just a horrific, horrific story. We know that in the Middle East, they've been having, outside of Israel, I should say, because Israel has been really leading the pack with vaccinations and dealing with corona. But I know countries like Iran and Iraq have had a very hard time with COVID, not having the facilities and not having the hospital beds and not having the oxygen to treat these individuals. And now a story like this, very, very unfortunate.
Yeah, very much so. Now, here's a unique story, Lisa. Border agents in Texas found $4.3 million of meth disguised as pickles. Tell me more about that.
This is a great story. I mean, I like the breakfast burritos more because I'm partial to breakfast burritos. The story about them hiding the narcotics in the breakfast burrito as well. This is a story about cucumber pickles that were in a truck, and they decided that they can wrap up the meth in a way that it would be just disguised with all these beautiful pickles. $4.3 million dollars. I mean, that's a lot of narcotics. But unfortunately, they were found. So try harder next time. Or what are they going to use next time? I don't know what food item they're going to use next time. But for those trying to hide narcotics in food, they're on to you. So you got to be more creative.
Yeah, just make sure you stay away from back bacon and donuts here in Canada. Those are Canadian staples. Don't mess with those. Please don't touch those. That's all we ask. One of our regular contributors, U.S. journalist Lisa Daftari, thanks for joining me today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.